Welcome back to the channel. My name is Big John. This video, we're going to start discussing tactical combat casualty care. Now, the $64,000 question is, why tactical combat casualty care? So we're going to go over a little bit of the history of it, where it came from, and why it's necessary for us. And so I got my cheat sheets, so I got my notes. Average response time in the United States of a 911 call is 20 minutes. Time is life, literally and figuratively. Time loss is brain loss if it's an MI. If it's a trauma event, whether it's a gunshot wound, saw get back in your leg, motor vehicle accident, you name it, arterial bleed, you lose consciousness in approximately 90 seconds. Death can be 2 to 3 minutes. So if you're looking at 20 minutes for a response time, this is why I asked several videos ago who is the first responder, and I said that you were. That's what I'm referring to. Between 1999 and 2017, there were 1,600 cases of deadly force used in churches. And it's actually increasing. ABC 3340 said it's up 54%. Now, again, what brought me to this with the church was the Pulse nightclub shooting in Florida, Orlando, Florida. And honestly, I don't remember when it took place. It was several years ago. But from the time 911 was called to they transported the first patient to the hospital was over 4 hours. Law enforcement has to clear the scene. They can't let paramedics into the scene is safe. If you ever take an EMT class, first words out of your mouth, anytime you're doing anything, is BSI, body substance isolation, is the scene safe. You know, if they let the paramedics go in and there's another active shooter or an IED or something like that, and the paramedics get hurt, there's nobody to take care of the paramedics, and if there's nobody to take care of the paramedics, there's nobody to take care of anybody else. So did people lose their lives from nobody's fault? Because they didn't have the training, they didn't have gear that they could have carried in their pocket or in their purse or whatever, you know. So that's why it is so, to my mind, it's so important. So what I want you to think about is, I want you to close your eyes, and for 30 seconds, it doesn't have to be a church, but you're at a family gathering, you're in a church, whatever, and there's an active shooter event. All things being equal, and in a perfect world, what would you want? Okay, now I don't know if that's been 30 seconds, but that's been a little bit of time. Now, as you were clicking off what you wanted it to have, do you have it? And if you have it, if you physically possess it, is it on your person at this time? Because if it ain't on you, you ain't got it. If your pistol is in the truck, it might as well be on the moon. It does not count. If your tourniquet is at the house, it does not count. Now, I'm gonna get on your heartstrings just a little bit, and I'm not gonna apologize. If you're in a motor vehicle accident on the way home, and your child has an arterial bleed, and you watch him bleed to death because you didn't take it seriously and you didn't have your gear, think about how you're going to live with that for the rest of your life. That's what I'm talking about. This is literally life and death. Jeff Gonzalez, who's a former SEAL, combat fundamentals or combative fundamentals, I forgot the name of the book. I got it years ago. This is back where everything was on DVD. It was all VHS and books. But he had what was called a personal protection directive. I acknowledge I am responsible for my own safety and the safety of loved ones who cannot protect themselves. I realize the world is not always a safe place, and the danger of a criminal or terrorist act is always possible. I will protect my loved ones and myself with and all means at my disposal. I have made up my mind that I'm willing to act and not be acted upon. I will use lethal force when no other option is feasible for the protection and safeguarding of life. I will design for myself my own force options and use them daily. I am prepared mentally, emotionally and physically to use lethal force if necessary. I will act quickly and decisively with a proportionate and timely amount of force when left with no other option. I will give no quarter until the safety of my loved ones is secured and keep my wits about me. I recognize I may be injured in a conflict, and I will make the decision now to continue to fight until the threat is removed. I am the last line of defense for my family and loved ones. I have discussed with my family and loved ones what to do in a dangerous situation to help control and mitigate the outcome. I have discussed with my family, friends, and religious leaders what I am willing to do to protect life. I have reviewed and understand the applicable laws and criteria governing the use of force in my region. I am prepared to handle the judgment of my family, friends, for my actions in the act of protecting life. I will acknowledge that I'm afraid of being injured and at the same time afraid of injuring others, but I will not place this fear above the safety of loved ones or myself. I will control my fear and not allow my fear to control me. That is just something to think about. So tactical combat casualty care, what is it? In the 1960s, during the Vietnam conflict, if you were a service member in Vietnam and you were wounded, you had a better chance of survival than an individual living in rural Alabama or rural Kentucky or wherever, because you had a medic or corpsman that gave care, you had buddy aid, the corpsman or a medic, and you had a dust off, you had a medevac that took you to a MASH unit. There was no widespread ambulance services at that time in rural areas. Now, as medics and corpsmen came back from Vietnam, that's what they started doing. Volunteer fire departments, ambulance services, and survival rates skyrocketed because we were able to get people to primary care, emergency rooms, that type of thing, in a more timely manner. And even then, of course, you still may have to wait. So in the 60s, corpsmen and medics took their training to train medics in the civilian field. A little bit later, corpsmen and medics in the service were being trained by EMT paramedics. And then there was a little thing that happened in the 1990s called the Battle of Mogadishu. I believe it was Operation Gothic Circle. The movie Black Hawk Down and the book Black Hawk Down is based on the events that happened. And as they were doing their after action report, they realized that the medics were treating this more as a civilian type thing. It was CPR. These people weren't elderly folks who were having a medical emergency, an MI, or a myocardial infarction, or a heart attack. These were combat wounds. This was trauma. And so while they were wasting time doing CPR on this individual, other individuals were dying because they didn't triage appropriately and they didn't treat it appropriately. So that's when they came up with the tactical combat casualty care. And so that's what I'm gonna try to teach, or at least give you a rough understanding of it. Ideally, this would be something we'd go over at least a couple days, hands-on, that type of thing. We're gonna try to do it 30 minutes maybe. And so you're not gonna be experts, but at least you'll have some basic knowledge and hopefully be able to help your family in the event of emergency. So when we look at CPR, and I'm giving my director and producer time to get everything kind of situated here. I was taught CPR, it was A, B, C, D, and E. And this was your order: airway, breathing, circulation, deformity, and exposure. The first thing you did after checking for responsiveness was to open an airway. Are they breathing? So airway, are they breathing? If not, you're breathing for them. Do they have a pulse? If they have a pulse, they have circulation. If they don't have circulation, you're gonna, didn't mean to hit the microphone. You're gonna do that for them. You're gonna make their heart pump. Deformity exposure, I'm not gonna worry too much about that. That will be broken bones Exposure is where we're basically taking the clothes off to make sure we're not missing anything. So it was always A, B, C, D, E. Now, with that combat casualty care, it's March. And I changed it just a little bit, and I don't mean to be presumptuous, but we're gonna be F March. Because what's the first thing that we need to do, assuming that this is not a motor vehicle accident, but this is an active shooter event? What is the first thing we do? And when they would ask medics, specifically SEALs, they would talk about starting a large bore IV, checking responsiveness, on down the line. First thing, is fire superiority. We have to neutralize the threat. If that means he dies, hey, I'm sorry. Ain't personal, it's just business. When we use lethal force, what we're doing is we're saying that what this guy or woman is doing that is so heinous, we do anything to stop them, up to and including kill them. Now that's not our ultimate goal, but if it's necessary, it's necessary. Now once they stop doing what they were doing, we stop. So first thing we're doing is fire superiority. If you were hit, you're the one that was hit. If at all possible, you continue to fight. If we take a gun out of the fight, that gives the bad guys more time to inflict more damage. So you don't stop fighting to treat your spouse or treat your child. If you're hit, you don't stop fighting to treat yourself. You neutralize the threat first. Then it's March. So, and the reason we're doing it this way is when I first did this, I taught it separate. It was trauma and then CPR. But as I got to looking at it, really in all honesty, once we get past M, this is CPR. So we can teach it all in one way. So we have fire superiority. The threat is either eliminated or they're gone. Doesn't matter, I don't care. So the first thing we're going to address is massive hemorrhage. We're going to stop the bleed. There's whole classes, and that's what it's called, stop the bleed. So we're going to use my buddy Bob here as an example. Now Bob is kind of messed up in more ways than one. He has no legs, he has no arms. So we're going to have to use our imagination. But when we talk about stopping bleeding, we actually are looking at it, where is he bleeding on his person? So if it's a limb, an extremity, his arms or his legs, we're going to use a tourniquet. The tourniquet is going to be high and tight into the axillary area, into the armpit, or into the groin. And I'll explain why in just a second. If it's in the shoulder girdle, or it's in the pelvic girdle, so we're talking basically above the nipple line to the neck, and then in the groin, which would be your belt line to where your legs attach. Of course, we can't get a tourniquet there. We can't get a tourniquet. I mean, you could put a tourniquet up here, but patient outcome tends to go down very rapidly once you put a tourniquet around their neck. May stop the bleed, but be that as it may. So, since we can't do tourniquets up here, we're going to pack the wounds in the pelvic girdle and the groin. But we're going to talk about, and you do not pack wounds in the abdomen. This would be from your diaphragm to basically your belt line. The reason being is you can pack gauze till the Lord comes again. And it's just gonna, the intestines will move, it'll go in. It's not gonna accomplish anything. What you would look at if it was in the abdomen, if the intestines were out, they have come through the abdominal wall. Do not put them back in. If you have time and resources, cover the intestines with a damp cloth to keep them moist, okay? So if these intestines are out, we're not putting them back in, we're just gonna cover it with cloth and keep water on it to keep them moist. The chest, we're gonna address in just a second. So, we have two types of tournaments. We have, and when I talked about this the other day when we was going over the IFAC, honestly, I forgot to bring a RAP tournament. This is a rapid application tournament. It was designed by a Special Forces medic in Afghanistan. The reason he designed it was for small children. How much?
15.
Okay. All right. We're at 15 minutes, so I'm going to stop. And then we're going to start again.